folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome back to the history of the Dice Tower, which at this point is still the history of me. Last time in part one, I talked about my childhood and the kind of the games that formed where I came to. And today I'm going to talk about going into college and the aftermath of that. I went to Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida. And when I arrived there, I wanted to do things with other people. I'm kind of a social person, didn't know much of things to do, and so board gaming was something I knew how to do. There wasn't a lot of board gaming happening at the college, but one of the first things I said is, I'm starting an Axis and Allies club. I picked Axis and Allies over Fortress America because I figured it had a more wide appeal, which is a correct thing to do. And I had a few guys show up and play it every once in a while, but it wasn't much of a thing because the big game on our campus there was Rook. Now, playing cards are still kind of frowned upon in many Christian communities, but Rook was different than playing cards somewhat. So everyone played Rook, and I even played it a little bit because, why not? Everyone else is doing it. Never was a huge fan of it, but the people there took it incredibly serious. And this was my first actual encounter with a trick-taking game. I had never played Hearts or anything like that before now. And so the idea of that I kind of found fascinating. But what I did was I saved up my money and went and got my other Holy Grail. See, when I was a kid, I had that Fortress America box that had Axis and Allies in the inside cover, and on the other inside cover was Samurai Swords. And I was like, man, I got to get this game, or Shogun, whichever version you have. And so I went, Toys R Us had it, bought it, brought it, played it, and it was fantastic. We played it a lot of times. In fact, at this point in time, I also played Risk for the first time. I had never played Risk as a kid for whatever reason. And I was like, well, these are interesting games. But Samurai Swords, I didn't like it as much because I would play with people, and here's where I started to see negotiation come into play. When we were kids, we negotiated, but it wasn't like here we were with other adults and negotiating and people saying, well, Tom's a better player, so we should take him out. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I really like this whole elimination aspect of the game, but it's what we had. Now, then came a major swing. I was playing games once in a while. I was playing a lot more video games and computer games and things like that at the time. But I collected baseball cards as a child. And back in the day, I haven't seen this happen in years now. Then when there was a mall, every once in a while there would be a baseball card show in the mall. So they didn't used to have all those kiosks in the middle. There's big open spaces there, and they would have shows and baseball card shows. And so I would say, hey, there's a baseball card show. So I went and looked at it. And I was at the baseball card show, and I saw this game called Overpower, Marvel Overpower. Now, I had heard about Magic the Gathering, I think I read it in Games Magazine. I said, that sounds like an interesting idea, and didn't think much more about it. I saw Overpower and I said, well, it's Marvel superheroes. It's kind of like Magic the Gathering, it looks like. Okay, I don't know what that's like. Let's try it out. So I think I bought 3 starter decks, took them back, played them with my roommate and the guy across the hall. We were like, oh, this is very interesting. Let's try it. We played it some more. I played it with one of my friends at the time. His name was Rod. And Rod played it, and Rod was like, nah, this game, I don't know about it. The next week, he showed up with his own deck, except he had added some cards because apparently you could buy booster packs for this thing. And suddenly my mind was blown. What? You can buy more cards? You could even, as we found out when we went to this smoke-filled little game shop in Pensacola, you could even buy singles. You could pick the cards you wanted. And there was another expansion just about to be added. So we started playing this, and this really was suddenly became the focus. I just wanted to play this game all the time and play it. And I organized tournaments amongst things. I remember distinctly my first or second summer there at Pensacola, and there was a Rook tournament going on because Rook was still very popular, but there was also an Overpower tournament because that's what I was running. And I just wanted to bring people together and play this game. And so Overpower was good and it was interesting, and I wanted to see what else there was, so then I moved into Battletech. Still didn't move into Magic for whatever reason. I just was like, nah, I don't really want to get into this Magic stuff. Battletech, I've been reading the Battletech books. This is great, and it was made by Wizards of the Coast. And that was really exciting. It didn't have as many expansions as Magic, and never would, as I come to find out, but the game played really well. And so there became a core group of 10, 20 of us, and we played these collectible card games all the time. Overpower and Battletech back and forth. And then I met a friend, Sam Healy, who is still in the Dice Tower today, and he introduced me to Star Wars, the collectible card game, because Sam will be a huge Star Wars fan. And so I looked at this. This was a completely different game. This wasn't play cards and blow the other person up. Here there was movement. You moved around. There was a strong Star Wars thing, which at that point in my life I'd still never even seen Star Wars, which Sam fixed, went and showed me all the movies. And then I fell in love with Star Wars and said, this is really great. I read all the Star Wars books and really enjoyed the Star Wars collectible card game. And while I was doing that, I wanted to see kind of more about BattleTech. So I went and got into the BattleTech board game. Now, this was another thing to me. I never touched miniature games before. BattleTech was the first one. I think I bought CityTech. It was a box that came with a bunch of plastic miniatures, and you could buy other models. And then I went and read the rules. I built my own mech. I studied. I played it. Really didn't get a lot of people to play this game with me, but I just was so fascinated. One of the things I found at this point in time was that I had so much fun with Overpower and Star Wars and BattleTech and the board game card game, was just putting this stuff together on my own. Like I would, at work, I'd be working on an assembly line and I'd be sitting there and doing stuff, and when the downtime I'd sit there and be thinking about decks that I'd make for these, or how I could best build a mech for the board game. And so all this was just a lot of fun. And then, during this time, I also was like, I want to do more with superheroes. So I got into a game called Heroes Unlimited at that smoke-filled store, which had not a lot of games there. I don't remember much about that store except when you walked in, when I came home, I always had to change my clothes. But there was Heroes Unlimited on the shelf from Palladium. Now, Heroes Unlimited is not a good role-playing game. It really isn't. But it is an excellent building game where you can build characters, and you can build so many different characters. And so I built characters, and then I just ran a little role-playing group. I didn't know much about it. We got together every Sunday afternoon, and we went and played superheroes, and I got together with some of my good friends, and we had a really great time doing that. And that continued even as I went out of college. Now, as I was going out of college, and transitioning, I got married there. And my wife, Laura, at this time, wasn't really interested in any of this stuff. She's like, oh, you have fun, play these games. But she really wasn't interested in any of these games. I never really found any kind of game that would fascinate her. We played a few board games here and there, but we didn't play anything that was, like, I guess the only one I could really think of would be Boulder Dash. Boulder Dash, I guess I shouldn't say it. That's the only one I could think of. I distinctly remember that because it's one of the first games I played with Laura. But we mostly played party games, and then people wanted to play Uno and things like that. But for the most part, this was like my guy hobby that I did on the side. And we had people over, and we would play these games, and I would play the role-playing games, and Laura would do something else. And I always wanted to do something with her, but it just seemed like they were separate hobbies, right? And then one day, I don't remember why, I had a bunch of people over at my house, and they were all playing different games and doing different things, and two guys came and set up Warhammer 40K. I had known about Warhammer 40K for years, a miniatures game. I was like, no, expensive. I don't want to do all that nonsense. And I watched them play the game, and I was like, well, I could do that. I could get into this game. So I went, and at that point in time, they were selling big army boxes for $200. I remember the price. I remember the box, so I bought an Eldar box because I hadn't seen anyone play this army. And so I put this stuff together, started playing it, and wow, I was hooked. Wasn't really hooked on the miniature part and the painting stuff. Actually, Laura helped me paint the stuff and put the miniatures together. But I just liked it. There was a store that was not the smoke-filled store, another store in a mall that had they sold model cars and trains, but they also had a place to play Warhammer Battles. So I would go there often, became friends with the owners, and I was really started getting into Warhammer 40K, playing it. Wasn't a real big fan of some of the guys who came and played 40K. I was like, I don't know, some of these guys seem a little, I don't know, they just weren't real fun to play games against, but I just liked the game. I liked putting the armies together. And in fact, at this point was my first taste of doing anything on the internet. I went to the internet and I said, okay, I'm going to build web pages about Warhammer 40K. And I made one with stats, like which armies beat which other armies. And I had people send me stats, and I made that. I had already made one internet website beforehand called Blinks Links. This was the Bedlam Brothers website with Blinks Links. This was for overpowered cards, and I tried to do a whole database on overpowered cards. That didn't really go anywhere, and neither did the Warhammer 40K page. But I liked the idea of this internet being around and existing to share with other people the games that I was playing. And then we moved to Korea. That's another whole series of events, but we moved to Korea. And when I went to Korea, I left my Warhammer 40K game in storage because I was going to come back in 6 months and pick up where I left off. Except I didn't come back in 6 months. Well, I did come back, but we came back to grab more stuff to take back with us to Korea because we were going to stay indefinitely. So I took my Warhammer 40K army back with me. I said I'll find someone to play it with. Sam Healy at this point also moved to Korea in the same area I was. We were both teaching English. And I was like, all right, so we played 40K against each other, but there wasn't a lot else to do, and there was literally nobody else. It was just me and Sam. Maybe once in a while we could find someone else to play Warhammer 40K. Nobody else. So we were looking for something to do, and I was especially looking for something to do with my wife. It really was starting to bug me that I wasn't really spending, gaming time or a lot of my time with her. And so I looked for something. So I remembered board gaming. I was like, all right, let's get some board gaming. I didn't start very high off here. I mean, the first one I got was Axis and Allies Europe. I went and looked for this game. Axis and Allies, I remember that. There's a Europe version. There's a Pacific version. So I got both of these versions and bought them, had them shipped to Korea. We started playing them. Okay, yeah, it's basically just me, Sam, and a couple other people playing these games. But it was fun and interesting. And I was like, all right, there must be other board games around. And I remembered Cosmic Encounter from my youth, so I got the Avalon Hill version of Cosmic Encounter. Well, now, finally, I had a game that Laura was willing to play. She still wasn't wanting to play it all the time. She still would rather have played Rook, because she was one of those Rookites from college who liked Rook. And I was like, oh, there's got to be something more than this. Another teacher moved to our area named Joe Stedman. And Joe Stedman, I was sitting to talk to him, found out he was interested in Warhammer 40K. But for some reason, we never really played Warhammer 40K, and I was talking about board games, and I said I had found this new website called Board Game Geek. And this website, I had found a review of Axis and Allies Europe and Pacific on this, and there was a whole bunch of other games, and they were ranked, and we both got interested in this website, me and Joe. And he said, here, let's get some of these games. I'm like, yeah, let's buy some games. So we decided to buy the top ranked games and some games we thought were interesting. So I said, I'll take the number 1 ranked game. He took the number 2 ranked game, which was Puerto Rico and Tigers and Euphrates, respectively. And then I just picked a bunch of other games, kind of like, oh, this looks interesting. Some of those games really made a mark on us. One of them was Settlers of Canaan. We picked Settlers of Canaan because we're Christians. We thought a Christian board game. This, I heard, is based on Settlers of Catan, which I hear is this, great, fantastic game. I played it. I said, wow, this is really fun. It's interesting. It's trading. I never had played a game like this. Another one was Frag. Now we laugh from Frag from Steve Jackson Games, but again I was like, this is like a video game come to life, and you move around and you're rolling dice and doing things, and we played so many games like this, and we just kept playing more and more games. And like I said, Puerto Rico, the number 1 ranked game on Board Game Geek, I played it and I was like, this is not number 1 of the world. Now my opinion on Puerto Rico has changed much over time, but we started getting these games and more games. I mean, it was like opening a floodgate. More and more games. And he would get games and I would get games. And then Sam jumped into the mix, got games. But we were playing these games not with just each other, but our wives were playing these with us too. And we started bringing other people in. I would take them and, I'd take the games and say, okay, I would start using the games in school. And I got more and more interested in games. And this was the direct core which led to the foundation of the Dice Tower. And that's what we'll talk about in our next video. I'm Tom Vasel. Thanks for watching the history of the Dice Tower. Until then, I'll see you next time.